We're now on segment 2 of which is funding sources in session 12. So where will the money come from? We figured out how much money we need. Where's it going to come from? So at startup, it's going to come from you or somewhere else. I know that that seems ridiculously obvious, but it's either you in the form of equity or debt, i.e. money that you're putting into the business as an owner or money that you're lending to the business as a lender. You can be a lender to your own business, or someone else in the form of them investing into it or lending the company money. And then once the business is going on, so the equity is the money invested into the business, the debt is money lent to the business or money the business borrows. That's the difference between equity and debt. Okay, now after startup, what are your options? Still you, equity or debt, somewhere else, equity or debt, or money the business earns and retains. So once you're in business, hopefully you're earning more than you're spending and you're building up money. You're building up a surplus to be able to use for other ways to grow the business. That money that is earned by the business and left in the business is called retained earnings. So there's the terminology. Now let's look at this a little bit deeper. If it's you equity, where can you pull money from? It can be as simple as your personal savings. Just put it into an account that you're using for business purposes. You can liquidate investments. A lot of people will do this if they've got some investments. Almost certainly it's going to make sense to go to your non-retirement account investments first, because if it's an IRA, there may be tax implications, there may not. The level of figuring out those details is beyond the scope of this instruction. You want to talk to your investment advisor about that. Now you could, if you do liquidate retirement accounts, I've known plenty of people that take part or all of their retirement and put it into a business. Nothing, you can do that. I would suggest you be very cautious if that's the choice that you're making. All, not just because then you've used that money for that purpose and maybe it'll go well, maybe it won't, but taxes and penalties may apply to the money you're pulling out of the IRA to put into your business. Maybe yes, maybe no. Again, talk with your investment professional about that to see how it relates to your specific circumstance. You can also take cash from an insurance policy. If you have the type of insurance policy that has a cash value in it, you can pull the money out or borrow. You can actually lend it to yourself and then you repay it to yourself. And what about you, debt? You can, from your own money, lend it to your business and then repay yourself. You can use credit cards. You can do cash advances or use a credit card that you say, okay, this is, I'm just making up an example. Let's say you've got 2 credit cards and you've got one that you tend to use and one that you don't tend to use. To get one of them, take the one that has a 0 balance on it, and then if you use that just for business purposes, it'll make it easier to keep track of things, and you can use a credit card to get a business going. There are some inherent dangers in doing that, but it's an option that's available. A HELOC is a home equity line of credit. So if you're fortunate enough to have a home that has equity in it, and you've got an equity line set up or would set up an equity line, you can access the money that you could pull out of that equity line for starting up a business as well. And we talked about a loan against an insurance policy. You can pull that out and lend it to the business rather than putting it in as equity. Now the somewhere else, friends and family is a term you hear a lot. So if somebody else is going to take ownership of the business, that would be equity. By definition, if it's gift funds, they're not an investor. It was a gift to you. There's no obligation to repay. So really, if somebody gifts you money for whatever reason, say, here's a chunk of money, I believe in you, I want to see you get this business going, I don't expect this money back, here's $2,000 to get it going. Okay, well at that point, that money is your money now, and then it's you putting in the equity into it because it's money you put in. Could be a partner. Do you take on a partner with the business? It could be an investor that expects a return on that money, so the equity could come from there. There's also crowdfunding. Okay, this is legal to do, but it comes with some very strong regulations and high costs. It's kind of the equivalent, nope, I don't have it there. It's kind of the equivalent of an IPO, an initial public offering for a small business. I know somebody that has done this. It can be very costly to do. I think the attorney's fees for him to get this set up was $25,000. It used to be, regulations used to require, this was not an option. Initially it was an option doing it this way, and then it became, they passed some laws with the securities laws. I mean securities as in stocks, bonds, types of stuff like that. So the same laws that govern that said, no, 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 you can't do that. It's against the rules. And then they changed the rules, they changed the legislation and allowed it to be implemented, and it's implemented. I know somebody that has successfully done it. Where about somewhere else debt? You can just go to a traditional bank, you can go to a community lender. Locally in our area, central Pennsylvania, and actually even over into eastern Pennsylvania, there's an organization called Community First Fund. I think they cover a 9 or 11 county area, something like that. And they have people that donate money to it, and they borrow some money, they get some grants, things like that. They have their own pool of money. They are not a bank, they're a community lender. So they don't have to follow the same rules as a bank. So if somebody has some credit bumps, that doesn't necessarily knock them out of the game. They're very interested in helping to support the business community. So if you have a company that is likely to provide jobs, that there's a greater likelihood that you will get the funds that you need. They will lend to startups, whereas traditional banks typically will not. There's also SBA, Small Business Administration, guaranteed loans. Please keep in mind, the SBA does not lend money. They guarantee the money that is lent by other institutions, whether it's a bank, or something like that, or a credit union. Then there's the typical friends and family. If somebody believes in you and is willing to lend money to you, you can borrow money from friends and family. A huge word of caution with that: please put in writing what you're doing. Here's why. Even if everybody has the best of intentions when you're starting out the business, and let's say that somebody says, hey, look, I'm going to pay, I can pay you back over 5 years, and the person lending would say, hey, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Well, you need to put down what the repayment terms are and how long it can be repaid over, because more than likely the people involved in that, in the borrowing money and who's lending the money, are not likely to remember with clarity, with absolute clarity, the details of that conversation. So by putting it down in writing, everybody's just on the same page, and then later somebody says, well, hey, you were supposed to be paying me $300 a month. You said, no, 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 it was only $250. All you gotta do is look at the piece of paper, and it's gonna tell you. It just gets rid of a lot of disagreements and misunderstandings because you've got a document that memorialized what the agreement is. Okay, crowdfunding. You can also do debt. They call it peer-to-peer lending. That's available out there. Small Business Administration, again, the SBA does not lend money. They guarantee the money lent by other institutions. They can also, the SBA also is now facilitating investment capital that can be done. And if you go to the SBA website, sba.gov, you can see there's loans, there's investment capital. They also do disaster assistance, surety bonds, and grants. But for now, we're talking about the loans and investment capital. Now, with the loans and investment capital, they lend to you. If this is of interest to you, you need to go to the site and you need to read the details, okay? Because they have, well, I don't want to go into all the details right now. Those are available sources. Whether or not it applies to you depends on what the investment group is looking for, and if you can meet the repayment terms. They're usually, the investors might even be lending money but expect a portion of the business. They want the money repaid plus an ownership stake in it. There's no other way around it than to read the details and see if it works for you. Okay, crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a way to get small amounts of money from a large amount of people for a particular project or a particular type of business. It's been around for a decade or plus or minus. There's several types. Let's take a brief look at it. There's the peer-to-peer lending like we talked about, which is just various people lending you money. It's facilitated online, And the crowd, as opposed to the banks, are the ones funding the other businesses. And do your research carefully. Make sure that you're okay with the terms that the money's being lent. Read the details, read the details, read the details. The details matter. There's rewards-based crowdfunding. Essentially, if you contribute to this business, we're going to give you this thing. Could be something as a t-shirt. I know somebody that wanted to publish a book. They weren't trying to make money off the book. They were trying to cover the publishing costs. So they calculated, okay, to run, I'm making up the details of this example, but the concept's correct. They wanted to publish 2,000 copies of this book, and they needed to sell 300 copies to be able to pay for all of it. So what they did was they did a crowdfunding campaign that said, hey, pre-buy this book, and then I'm going to use your money to publish this whole run, and then I'll send you an autographed copy in there. And it worked. He did it. So successful author, published book. There you go. Now, it can also, with the thing that you'll give to the people, it can be whatever your product or service is. You can say, hey, we're trying to do this crowdfunding campaign because we are going to manufacture bracelets. And here's the line of bracelets. Here's what they look like. Here's a couple examples. You can, pre-order it, and you pay for it up front. And then once they're manufactured, then they send them to you. So it's just, in my view, it can be an effective way of pre-selling what it is that you do. You get the money up front. You get the money to get the business launched or grow it to the point that you can provide the product or service that they're buying, and off to the races. So, I already said all these things, the form of pre-sales and everything. There's equity-based, where people become shareholders in your company, but please be careful. If you're going to do this, read the regulations that govern this. This is no joke. You're in the land of investment solicitation. There's a lot of rules and regulation around it. It is the small business version of an IPO, and expect it, like I mentioned earlier, expect it to be 20, 30,000-ish. Like I said, the one buddy of mine that did it, it was $25,000 in attorney's fees just to get the paperwork prepared. Now, tailor your plan to whom you want money from. If you want an investor, then you've got to clearly illustrate how they're going to get their money back plus a return, and what's that return going to be. If you are going to borrow money, how are you going to make those periodic payments, those monthly payments, quarterly, some types of lending, it's an annual payment. How is that going to happen? And then, because keep in mind, unless a lender or investor is going to get out of it what they want, why in the world would they lend the money or invest the money? You need to give them a clear path as to how they get their money back, plus either the interest or a return on their investment. And everything we've been talking about up to this point, all of these sessions over this whole weekend course here, has been leading up for you to be able to answer those questions. Now, it might be that you don't need a loan or investor. Maybe you've got the money you need to get your business off the ground. Well, given the lessons we were just talking about a little bit ago, that lets you know the amount that you need. And so you've got a target now of either what you need to save or what you need to invest into your own business to be able to get it off the ground. So, and hopefully with the crowdfunding, you can sell this to the public anyway, whatever it is that you're going to be offering as a product or service, and you're going to get some publicity out of it. It's going to be good. So make sure that, but you've got to also create a pitch. You've got to be able to clearly explain to people, here's what I'm producing, here's what I'm going to be producing, here's what you'll get, here's what I need in exchange for that. And it relies a lot on getting the word out. So you're still going to have to do a lot of publicity with your crowdfunding campaign to raise it. Just because you go to a website and put a crowdfunding campaign together doesn't mean anybody knows about it. How are you going to build that interest? Okay. Don't forget, if you're borrowing money, include the anticipated repayment of the loan in your plan that you would show to the investor. Okay? Because especially if you're operating on a thin revenue stream there, the repayment of the loan could put you into the negative. So once you've done all this and you figured out how much you need, and if it's going to be in the form of a loan, whether that payment's going to be $100, $1,000, $10,000, whatever it is, you need to include that in your monthly or expenditures for whatever it is. Next, we're going to talk about break-even analysis. This formula is very short, but it's very important. It gives you the number you need every week, day, month, whatever the period is you calculated it over, to know the difference between whether you were profitable or not. I think it's an incredibly helpful number to be able to know.